Welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Amy Weishart. I'm the director here at the library. Started a couple of months ago, and it's great to see all of you here in person. We also have a few participants on Zoom, and we are recording this talk tonight. We'll make it available on our website after tonight. So we're really pleased to have Jennifer Nadel here tonight to speak about how compassion can transform politics, economy, and society. And we have Arthur Martinez here, who's the president of our board, who will be doing a short introduction. So, thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Welcome to our library. I hope you all know it very well. I don't know Amy very well yet, though she just started with us the end of the first quarter, but we're delighted to have her as our new director. This is a pretty special library. As you all know, it's 130 years old this year. It's a community-supported library for the benefit of the community. So we take essentially no government funds to operate this library. It's based entirely on philanthropy, and that's not an ask. That's not an ask. But, so I'm happy to introduce Jennifer Nadel this evening to you, who's speaking. And I'm going to introduce our co-conspirator, who's sitting in front here. Jennifer trained as a lawyer before she became a British television journalist, working for BBC and ITV from around the world. Since then, she has sat on the national executive of the UK Green Party, run for parliament twice. Yes, he didn't win, did you? And written a Sunday Times bestseller with actress Gillian Anderson called We, a Manifesto for Women Everywhere. I think we'll hear a little bit about that tonight. And in 2018, she co-founded the UK-based think tank Compassion in Politics. She's a summer resident of Seal Harbor, spends her winters in London. Her fourth book is How Compassion Can Transform Our Politics, Economy, and Society, and it's a collection of essays from leading academics, activists, and thinkers on the impact compassion could have in our world. And boy, do we need some compassion right now the way things are going. Andrea Yura, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Clark, grew up in Argentina amid the political violence in the 70s until her family moved to North America. After completing her university studies, she returned to Buenos Aires, one of the most beautiful cities in the world. This place. To reconnect with her roots, she followed with interest the stories that then emerged about the children who disappeared, the youngest victims of Argentina's military dictatorship of the 1970s, who were coming of age and grappling with the fates of their families. She conducted a number of interviews documenting the stories, which inspired her debut novel, On a Night of 1,000 Stars. And Andrea will be speaking about that book in another week at another evening like this at the library. She now lives in New York City with her family and spends her summers on NBI as well. So without further ado, please welcome Jennifer.
Introduction, and Amy, welcome to one of the two best libraries on the island as a Seal Harbor resident. I held two favourite libraries, and thank you all for braving the rain and coming out to hear about this book. The book is really a manifesto for what a compassionate world would look like. We have people from all sorts of academic disciplines writing about the impact that compassion could have if it were applied to the economy, the environment, immigration, social security. But rather than take you through some rather dry but very interesting academic essays, I'm going to talk about the bigger picture, about the ideas that lie under the book, and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing is because of this picture here. This is a picture of the kinder transport. For those of you who don't know, does everyone know what the kinder transport is? For those, okay, some who don't. So for those of you who don't know, the kinder transport was organised by British volunteers to rescue Jewish children from Austria and Germany in the run-up to the Second World War. And they rescued 10,000 children, and one of them was my father. So I'm standing here today because of compassion. I wouldn't be here, I wouldn't exist without compassion. My sisters wouldn't exist without compassion. So for me, compassion is about life, and death. And the other thing that I sadly know about compassion is that if you were escaping today, I don't think you would have got to England. So many refugees now are drowning at sea. I'm going to talk about the UK, but I'm sure you'll be able to apply it to your own situation because there are so many parallels that are happening. We have now made it a criminal offence for captains to rescue people at sea, and they're not allowed to land. So they will fill their boats with people who are drowning as they try and cross the Mediterranean to reach the safety of Greece or Italy. But no one will allow them to dock, and so they risk their lives, and many of them don't make it. And of course, if you are fortunate enough to make it to the UK, you're likely now to be put on a plane to Rwanda. So that's how compassionate we are as a nation. We've decided to take all the refugees who come and send them to Rwanda because it's a fantastic land of opportunities, which is why we all go for holidays there, send our children to college there, and generally rave about it. So yeah, compassion has been edged out, and it isn't just, yeah, so let's say that for a minute. Come in, everybody, thank you for coming. So compassion is being edged out, and then if we add to that these two likely lads, and we're really, really in trouble. You know, two people with narcissistic personalities and zilch on the empathy and compassion scale. So we are in an interesting situation, and although they are both gone for now, it's not the end of the story, as we all know. So I've been, let me let Erling in. So as the introduction said, I've been working in and around Westminster for the last 30 years. So initially as a journalist, then as an activist, then as a parliamentary candidate, then on the national executive of a political party. I've also run single issue campaigns on the environment and homelessness. And it's often felt like we are all competing with each other. And that it's a game of whack-a-mole. You know, let's say we make some progress on homelessness, you know, climate change is still there. Let's say we get everyone to sign up to net zero, then we still have people drowning at sea because we have no compassion for them. So I decided to take a step back and think, what connects all of the pressing social justice issues that break most of our hearts? And for me, it's the absence of compassion. And it's not that we never had compassion. In the UK, at the end of the Second World War, we founded a welfare state that provided care from the cradle to the grave. Housing free, benefits. We were all taken. So we need to let somebody in.
Oh, somebody else.
But in the UK at the moment, that's gone. And here, after the Second World War, there was a similar feeling that we owed our liberty and the freedom of the Western world to those who had risked their lives and the families of those who had lost their lives. And really, for me, this story begins in 1979 in the UK, and with the election of Reagan soon after here, and the Chicago School of Economics, and really the legitimization of greed and competitive self-interest that came in with that new economic model. And the lie that we were all told of trickle-down economics, that there's no problem, we don't need to limit the wealth that the rich get because it will somehow magically trickle down and all of us will be lifted and the poor will be lifted out of poverty. We only have to look around and see 40 years on how well that has or hasn't worked, or who it's worked for. It's worked for those who have got richer and richer, but the trickle-down effect we're still waiting for. So along with that new school of economics came a new narrative. Instead of a compassionate nation where, you know, religion played a big part in the cultural norms, we take care of our neighbours, we look after each other, there but by the grace of God go I. came in a different cultural norm, which is that we've got to look after ourselves. If we're failing, then somehow that's on us. And if we're succeeding, that's on us. You know, the luck and good grace and good fortune that often accompanies people making it in this world is now turned around to be actually just a manifestation of one's own personal achievement, rather than recognizing the luck that is often involved, the luck in not losing one's health, the luck in not getting hit by a car, the luck in not losing the parent of your children. Whatever the luck is completely ruled out. So we live certainly in the UK in a society where we blame those, and we see them as suspect. People who need the state's help are malingerers or skivers or trying to get something for nothing, are not worthy. And that has been culturally encouraged by government after government. The Labour government in the UK, as well as Conservative government, they introduced this thing called the benefit cheat line, which encouraged neighbours to ring up and report their neighbours if they were claiming social security while conducting a job. You know, literally turning person against person. So this project of greed and of the accumulation of wealth and competitive toxic self-interest has culminated in a world where we don't even have compassion for those who are struggling because it's somehow their fault. And in the latest and most cruel twist, we take the language of psychology and say that we're encouraging dependency. If we help people when they're struggling, they're just going to become dependent. Better to leave them where they are and let them pick themselves up, irrespective of whether or not that's possible. And we both now live in countries with appalling levels of hunger, homelessness, and avoidable suffering. You know, there is so much in life so much suffering in life that is unavoidable. And if government has one purpose and politics has one purpose, it's to try and alleviate avoidable suffering, the suffering that isn't necessary. So in 2018, together with a colleague, I co-founded Compassion in Politics, and this book is one of our projects. It's the academics and thinkers in it are our supporters. And we founded it with the idea of trying to put compassion into the heart of both the substance of politics and into the way politics was done. And as some of you here know and have already suggested, there's a visitor here who said it to me. I told people about the talk I was coming to and they all laughed. So the immediate reaction we got was compassion in politics, you got to be kidding, or nice ideas, shame about the real world. But actually, we knew that that wasn't really the whole picture, because as a journalist, I'd interviewed many politicians from all parties, and most of them had been drawn into politics because of a desire to make the world better. They may have very different ideologies and methodologies about how that happens, but most are called to public service initially with the goal of doing something to leave the world a better place, whether that's driven by ego or narcissism. All of those things we can leave to one side. But certainly in all the politicians I've met and spoken to, I would say that 80% have that very clear kernel of compassion. And the other thing we realized was that the other motivation for setting it up was that, you know, we live in a very divided, as you do, politically divided nation, where we have a first past the post electoral system, a very binary system. One side wins and they have all the power, and everyone else who didn't vote for them then has to live according to their political ideology and doctrine. And there was talk of setting up a new political party. What we need is a new party, and that happens every so often. But we just thought, we don't need a new party. What we need is for those on either side of the house who share the same beliefs and compassion to come together. So we decided to set up a cross-party think tank that would work equally with politicians from every single party. And I have to say, as someone who had been in a political party, it was a huge relief to be freed from that constant conflict of, do I follow the party line? The party won't like it if I say this, to actually just to be able to be true to my own moral conscience and calling. So despite all cynicism, within 4 months we had 40 members of Parliament signed up from all sides of the House, and we were named by the Guardian newspaper as the movement to be most hopeful for. We now work with 100 plus members of Parliament. And just before I came over, I was called in by a very senior Conservative who said, we need a reset. And I hadn't met him before. And I said, shall I just run through a bit about what we do? He said, I know what we do. I've been following since you started. We need you to organise a reset. And, you know, when you've got senior Conservatives asking you to help, you know, A, things are really, really bad, but B, that there is a willingness and a hunger for a different way of doing things. So what's coming up next? I can't remember. Oh yeah, this is coming up next. So one of the things we work with is the way politics is conducted. So let's just hear, this is the Speaker of the House of, oh no, it's a video. Can I play it?
Yeah.
Can you, how do I play it? Okay, well, I don't think I can play it, but can you do it? Anyway, this is the Speaker of the House of Commons, and if we had the audio and if the footage were to roll, you would hear him shouting, shut up, all of you, shut up. And there would be cheering, and there would be booing, and there would be name calling. And that is how we conduct our politics. And we wonder why we live in a divided state. We wonder why there's so much toxic abuse of politicians. If our leaders are shouting at each other as if they were worse than children in the schoolyard, it's not going to elevate the quality of discourse. So we're now working with that speaker to try and improve the way this discourse happens. I have a lot of fun doing my job. We brought HR experts into the House of Commons and said, can you just do a comparison between how the House looks compared with other workplaces, and you can imagine the outcome. And you know, I mean, you know, what he and some other politicians would say to us, you know, it's just letting off steam. In fact, Matt Hancock, who used to be our health secretary during the COVID crisis, said to me, that's how I test ideas. You know, if you don't say it out loud on the floor of the House, how are you going to get a feel for how the idea is going down? I said, well, if it's such a good idea, how come major companies don't use that method of testing out their ideas? It's absolute nonsense. And really, you know, that way of behaving is a way of, you know, it's camouflage for misogyny, for sexism, for bullying, and for perpetuating a very conflict-ridden approach to politics. And we're now seeing the consequences of that. Okay, so this is one of our other campaigns. Doesn't really need too much said about it. We are operating in a space beyond fact, beyond truth. Facts, we don't know what is factually accurate, what isn't factually accurate. I mean, I assume that most of us in this room do, but for many people, it's not about factual truth. It's about a sense of identity, a sense of belonging, and we're in a quagmire where we're beyond facts, and trying to argue just on a factual basis is not going to happen. We have to find other ways. We have to bring psychology into the frame. We have to find other ways of reaching people so that they can then reduce the inflammation. You know, one of the best descriptions I've heard of our politics at the moment is that we're all in a triggered state. We're in fight or flight. We're in the caveman part of our brain where all of us are just defended. And in order to be able to use the nuanced part of our brain, the rational part of our brain, the part of our brain that uses comparisons, we need to become untriggered. But despite everything I just said about living in the post-truth age, we decided to launch a campaign, a very simple one. We like to do really simple things. In the UK, we have a law called the Misrepresentation of Goods Act, which basically says that if you're selling a car to someone, you can't say this is a Rolls Royce if in fact it's a Ford, or you can't say this car has 4 wheels if in fact it's just sitting on the hub. So we thought, why don't we just translate that into politics and have the Misrepresentation of the People Act. So we set up an online petition, and it got a lot of public support, and that bill was debated on the floor of the House of Commons last month, and is going to be debated again in October. So it's not going to become law, but nevertheless, we are getting people to start thinking that these things are possible. So much of what's happening that is wrong in our politics has become normalised. You know, the levels of homelessness have become normalised, hunger has become normalised, food kitchens have become normalised, shouting has become normalised. The fact that we can't get our politicians to be honest and we just have to live with that reality, get real, that's just what politicians are like. It doesn't have to be like that. You know, the rest of us can't conduct ourselves like that, and there's no reason why politicians should be able to. It's not beyond our wit. And these are some of, this was one campaign we ran. We had over 100 MPs. It was essentially a voluntary code that they all undertook not to behave as we just saw the speaker behaving in the House, to speak in the first person, not to throw accusations. So we have 100 MPs now signed up to that agenda. We also try and do practical things. So this is a substance of compassion. When the pandemic happened, the UK government issued a decree that all homeless people were going to be taken in and found hotel rooms. That was fantastic, but they did nothing for victims of domestic violence. All the homeless, all the domestic violence refuges had to close their doors because of fears of COVID, and the government refused to do anything. So we got together with hotels and got them to take in women and children fleeing domestic violence, which they did, and all of the people they took in have now been permanently housed, which is probably the thing that I'm most happy about, actually, compared with anything else. What do we mean by compassion? First of all, what we don't mean by compassion, we are going to have a conversation, and I've just got to get all of these things out and then we can talk about it, is compassion isn't kindness. It may involve kindness, but it isn't kindness. Kindness is something we do when we feel like it. Oh, I'm going to give you one of the loose dollar bills in my pocket, or actually not today, or you're a bit grubby, or you're a bit forceful in the way you're asking me. So kindness is something that we bestow. It's hierarchical. I'm not saying it's bad. Kindness is great, and I'm signed up to the random acts of kindness and doing a kind act every day. But kindness, a bit like philanthropy, depends on largesse. And compassion is about standing shoulder to shoulder. It's recognizing the humanity of every human, and that every human has equal worth, and that if someone else is suffering, then we are under an obligation to act. So compassion is non-hierarchical, and it's founded on equality, and that means equal all over the world. The political philosopher Peter Singer, does everyone know his? No, okay, so he's an extraordinary political philosopher. He was responsible for the animal liberation, the idea of animal liberation, and now he's working a lot on extreme poverty. And he sets this dilemma for his students. He says, imagine you're alone, you're walking through some woods, and you happen upon a small pond, a shallowish pond, but nevertheless a pond, and then you notice that there's something in the pond, and it's a child, and they've fallen over and they're face down and they can't get up. What do you do? And the students say, we go and pull the child out. Of course we do, of course we do. So then he says, okay, so let's imagine the same situation. You're walking along and you see this child in the middle of this muddy pool. You look around, there's no one around, there's no parent, there's no one else who can help. You're on your way to a really important job interview, and you're wearing your best shoes and your really expensive coat, and they are going to be destroyed if you get into this muddy pond and you're going to be late for your interview. What do you do? And they respond, we get in the pond, a child is dying, of course we get in the pond. And then he takes it one stage further and he says, you know, children are dying all over the world right now. And we're not getting in that pond, we're not giving up our coat, we're not giving up our time, we're not giving up our expensive shoes. So what is it that makes the child on the other side of the world of less value to the child that's immediately in front of us? And of course, there's no difference. We know there's no difference, but most of us feel so hopeless and so despairing that we shut ourselves off to the possibility that there is something we can do. So I'll just quickly, this is a bit boring, but I'm just going to tell you what compassion is. It's not kindness. It's an empathetic concern for the suffering of another. I read a really depressing report. They scanned, they did, fMRI scans of students' brains, economist students' brains. I'm going to come back to this in a moment, and showed them pictures of homeless people, and nothing registered in the centre where empathy would normally show. There was absolutely nothing. When they asked those students, well, what do you think this homeless person would most like to eat? And they became imaginatively engaged, then the empathy centre started to light up. But essentially, we are losing empathy. It's become so normal, and also because of the cultural changes I talked about, the blaming, the why don't they just get a job attitude has led to this hardening and lack of empathy. So compassion involves two things. The first is empathy, empathetic concern for the suffering of another. I feel someone's suffering and I feel something about it. And then the crucial thing, it's action to alleviate that suffering. So compassion isn't a feeling, it's an action, it's a motivational state where we do something. And a lot of us are filled with despair in the current political situation that we find ourselves in. But the antidote for despair, for me at any event, is taking action. Because when we take action, we have a sense of agency. We feel as if we are somehow engaged in moving towards a solution, even if what we can do is very little. And there's a beautiful, not Mary Oliver, Arthur, help me out, not Mary Oliver, the other American poet with a faith, female American poet with a faith, Emily Dickinson, thank you. And she says, if I can stop one human heart from breaking, I will not have lived in vain. So I think that's a really good goal to set ourselves. And then, okay, I think that I'm just going on for too long. So I'll just say just a few more things. So why compassion? There are some pretty good reasons, apart from the moral imperative of compassion and apart from the feeling that it lifts us out of despair, and it's good. One of them is the health benefits of compassion. A longitudinal study was done during COVID, and what they found was a correlation between levels of compassion and levels of resilience to COVID. And this was global, it applied to every country, it didn't matter whether or not what the government was doing. And the other thing it found was those who had animosity or active antipathy towards compassion had worse health outcomes. So there is something in compassion that is good for us. It's the new vitamin C, is what I like to say. Similarly, compassion training in schools has been shown, this is a pilot scheme that's being operated in Portugal, has been shown to improve children's physical well-being. Not just, we know it'll improve mental and emotional well-being, but it actually produces physiological symptoms of well-being, including improved immune system and resilience. So there's going to be money in this somewhere along the line if we can somehow stop people getting so sick by compassion that, you know, we can find a motivation to work with, you know, make the metrics look good. So that's that. And I just have to say one thing about economists, and I have some very good friends and I love lots of people who are economists, but there's been study after study which shows that compassion levels amongst those who choose to study economics are the lowest of any other discipline, and that where you are on that initial scale determines whether or not you're going to drop out. So if you're at the higher level of the compassion level when you've decided to study economics, although lower than the other disciplines, there's a greater chance that you will drop out. So there is something about the way we teach economics that leaves heart and soul out. And so that's one really easy fix that we could make, is to change the way we teach economics. And you know, we would like to see, there's a chapter in here, a well-being economy, where instead of measuring gross national product, we measure well-being as Bhutan does. Another thing about compassion is it's innate. Everyone feels it. At 18 months, all children will respond with anxiety if someone near them is unhappy, and will try to comfort them. So it's something that's innate. We're not trying to make people be something other than they are. It's innate, but it can be amplified or it can be minimized. Fear is one of the things that makes us less compassionate. There was an amazing study done in the States here, where this was pre-pandemic, where they gave one half of the sample of people who were taking part a hand sanitizer to use and the other half not. And then they asked them both identical questions about their views on immigration. Those who had used the hand sanitizer were more liberal in their views, and that was because they felt safer. Just that small, tiny little infinitesimal improvement in the feeling of safety, the fact that there was no danger of germs, correlated with greater liberal or more compassionate views. So, you know, whether we amplify fear or not, and that feeds into the triggered state. The other thing compassion does is it reduces out-group antipathy. So when people go through a compassion training course, their levels of antipathy towards those they view as others other than themselves are reduced. And I think Andrea and I are going to talk about this. You know, this need to build bridges, not walls, is really, really crucial, especially amongst those of us who think we know what everyone should be doing and how wrong everyone else is. So we'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. And I just love this Rumi quote on that. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field, I'll meet you there. How amazing would it be if we just said, okay, we've got some really pressing problems to solve: climate change, world hunger. In the UK, we have a rising rate of infant mortality alone amongst OECD countries. You know, how would it be if we tried to have this conversation and left our ideology at the door and just entered the space looking for solutions? And then finally, for anyone who's not feeling as cheerful, and this hasn't been a bundle of laughs for them, I love this from Marion Wright Edelman. You just need to be a flea against injustice. Enough committed fleas biting strategically can make even the biggest dog uncomfortable and transform even the biggest nations. So when you're feeling like there's nothing I can do, just think like a flea, get out of there and bite strategically, find other fleas, do it en masse. Anyway, so I will leave that there. Thank you very much for
So nice to see so many people here. Of course, Jennifer, this is wonderful. I am like the audience, so curious to learn more, and I feel like you've already given me so much to think about. And I have some questions. You might have already answered some of these in your talk, but my first one is, well, how have people, politicians in particular, responded to your book and Compassion in Politics? What's been the response?
Well, as I said, generally we have found a more compassionate response, and in a sense compassion is like a Trojan horse. We say to people, do you support the idea of more compassion in politics? I think we've had one politician who says they don't, but then once they do, we take them on a journey. You know, what does compassion actually look like? You know, how it means, for example, that you can't pass a law that would push those in already vulnerable circumstances into worse circumstances. So we have that conversation, but there is a hunger for something different. The fact that we've got over 100 MPs working with us in such a short period of time. People want a reset, and people are scared. People are scared, politicians are scared. They don't want what's happening to happen, and yet they're trapped in their respective silos. So compassion gives them a way out, or a return to a value-based approach to politics.
Right, well, that's wonderful that you had that senior conservative call you. So it sounded like an emergency. And I hope you can follow up soon with them. Well, I'm listening to your previous book, and my mother-in-law is reading it. It's wonderful. It's called A Manifesto for Women Everywhere. I'm halfway through it, but a lot of it is already about self-compassion. And I'm wondering, how do we translate self-compassion into the kind of compassion that we would show towards others? We can talk a little bit more about that. I feel like the journey for me is starting
Thank you
with
for
this
the
book.
plug for the other book,
Yeah.
which is a much easier read than my current.
It's a beautiful read, and I'm listening to it, and it's wonderful to hear Jennifer and Gillian Anderson, who's the co-author.
So one of the other things about compassion is, because it's not a feeling, you don't need to feel compassionate in order to act compassionately. So you don't need to have compassion in you to act compassionately. You need to act passionately, and often the feelings follow the actions. But self-compassion is absolutely crucial. And especially for women who for too long, we viewed taking care of ourselves as something that needs to be put at the bottom of the list, and we've got to look after everyone else's needs. But the reason why self-compassion is really important is because if we don't look after ourselves, and by self-compassion, I mean taking time out each day to try and silence the critic in our heads, the voices, the endless voices that tell us that we're not doing enough, that we're not good enough, that we're idiots, and no one wants to hear from us, whatever it is that our Chucky is saying, we need to pay attention, take time out, learn to meditate, learn to really try and work to silence that voice. We need to take care of ourselves physically. You know, so often I work with women, I mentor a lot of women as a result of that book. I work with them and they'll ring me up in a hysterical state about something terrible that's happened, and I'll say, what did you have for breakfast? And they'll go, breakfast? I didn't eat breakfast, I'm in a crisis. And I'll say, well, eat some breakfast and then call me back, because we forget that we are basically humans. And just like a toddler, if we miss our sleep, if we miss our exercise, if we miss our mealtime, we are going to be much less emotionally resilient. And why that really matters to me is that now is a moment when we are all called to step up. You know, the Roe versus Wade decision, all of us now are called into some form of activism. And if we are not taking care of ourselves, we're going to burn out, or we're going to get drawn into some toxic dynamic, as we see play out throughout the political world. So self-compassion really is the fuel in our tank to enable us to go out and do good stuff.
Well, you're talking about, it's time for all of us to step up. And I think one of the things that I'm starting to read in your book is about courage, the need to be courageous to do this. And you tie that into both internal courage and also external courage to be able to stand up for your moral conscience. And I think that I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that, the need for courage, both internally and then to be able to, speak up for yourself.
Yeah, and internal courage isn't like the kind of courage of the matador, or whoever it is who holds the red thing while the bull's charging you. Internal courage is a lot about getting honest about what you actually feel and what you actually mean. You know, because so many of us say yes when we mean no, or remain silent when we should have spoken up. And so many of us also carry stories that just aren't true. You know, we all experience damage, no matter how well-intentioned our parents are. We will all suffer some form, to greater or lesser extent, of emotional damage. So what do? Many of us develop a story about this. Well, I came from this kind of background and this is really difficult for me. But unless we have the courage to actually do the work, deal with that and step beyond our story, we can't step into a place of wholeness. And it's very difficult to be courageous if we're still deeply in need of others' approval, of others' support, if we're still trying to make up for any deficit that happened in our early years, or get over a rejection, or, you know, whatever has happened to us, you know, unless we do the work to move beyond that story, we're not going to have the courage, because we'll feel like we're putting ourselves at the edge of the pack and we're going to die. You know, I remember, you know, before I embarked on the work that's outlined on this book, you know, I was terrified, absolutely terrified at saying something that people might disagree with, because I didn't want to be cast out.
Well, this is kind of the political climate we're in right now, so.
Yeah,
There's
unfortunately.
the bullying that you mentioned, you know, it's also happening here in the US. And but I want to go back to the book, the collection of essays, and in there you have a wonderful essay about the dangers of being right. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you mean?
Sure. So that's actually my essay. Thank you for being nice about it. So yeah, one of the things, having worked in politics, that I really saw in, you know, the Green Party, which is, you know, the good guys. They're the good guys. I saw more toxicity than I've seen in any other workplace that I have ever experienced in the climate change movement. It was absolutely the same. I do some work with the Labour Party, with women, particularly in the Labour Party. They have a horrific time. There is something about people who claim moral rectitude that somehow leads to them feeling it's okay to behave however they want to behave, because the cause is so urgent, so necessary, so right. And that in turn becomes part of one's identity. So, you know, who would I be if I wasn't, you know, the eco warrior? And I'm not going to have anyone tell me. In the UK, we recently had these really extraordinarily powerful blockings of freeways by people who wanted the government to insulate Britain, you know, in the middle of an oil crisis, fuel crisis. Why don't we insulate the houses? And anyway, we won't even go there. It's a no-brainer. But they blocked an ambulance coming, and the leader of this environmental movement said, well, people are going to die. You know, and that kind of thing is just not okay. It's just not okay. Same, you know, there are various other issues that I'm sure we have all read about or are involved in, where it's simply people are behaving in ways that are just not okay because they're right. And what happens is that each time we tell ourselves how right we are, we're making the other more wrong, and we are actually creating a division. You know, so we talk about, you know, the wall that Trump is building or was building, but we right thinking us can build our own walls, and we can other those we disagree with, and that can feel very satisfying. I personally love being right. It makes me feel really good, but it doesn't get us anywhere because it doesn't build that bridge. And, you know, that's why I love that Rumi quote. We have to step beyond being right into a place where it's not about being right or wrong. It's about how do we connect with the basic humanity of the other.
You also talked a little bit about how you feel despair. Some of us, I think, here are feeling somewhat desperate about the current political environment. Is there anything that we could be helpful about?
Apart from being fleas,
Yeah.
and the power of fleas. I think there are, you know, for so long, economists have, sorry to go on about economists, and apologies to any economists here, have told, you know, have had us believe that we're just these self-interested little units that will pleasure seek and you know, that they understand how we work. And we've come to really believe that we live in a quasi-Hobbesian state of, you know, the war of all against all. But we've seen two recent examples of how that's simply not what human nature is. We've seen the pandemic, you know, in the UK, everyone was helping everyone else. You know, the vast majority of people are compassionate, and the pandemic gave us a moment when we could lay down our weapons and show that compassion and concern for our fellow and sister human beings. And then again, in the UK, we've recently had the Ukraine crisis. The number of people whose politics I really do not like, who have provided homes or taken in Ukrainian families. You know, that goodness is there, it is in us. And what we have to do is connect through that goodness. And if we can somehow find our collective identity and belonging through that goodness, rather than through the things that set us apart, then we're on to a winner. And I think I was saying to you earlier, you know, I love the metaphor of the ocean liner. You know, how do you take that huge, great, enormous bit of floating metal and get it to change course? You just need to move the steering wheel a little, just a few millimeters, and over time it will turn around. So I think change is possible, and I remain optimistic.
Great.
Or deluded.
Well, how can people find out more, and what's next?
Okay, so I would love all of you to sign up for the Compassion in Politics at the Compassion in Politics website, and sign up to our newsletter so you can see what we're doing. We have just started a small social media presence here. We have groups that have sprung up in South America, Australia, Spain, Denmark, South Korea. So you can follow us if you're on social media at Compassion in Politics US. And also I'm really excited that I've just been invited to run a kind of global version of what we've been doing in the UK, which is being founded in California. And that will be working globally to try and promote levels of compassion across the world, and to try and connect all of those who are working in compassionate ways. You know, whether you're working on homelessness, hunger, ministry, you know, whatever you're working in, if you are motivated by compassion, if all of us get together, we can create that compassionate majority, irrespective of what party we belong to or what flag we fly. So I'm really excited about that, and if you sign up for the Compassion in Politics newsletter, you will find out more about that when it launches.
That sounds wonderful. I'm done with my questions, so I'd love to open it up to the audience to see if anybody has a question for Jennifer.
You had mentioned since the Reagan administration, there's been a lot of laws that have been changed under the radar of people's eyes in our country to make for greater inequality. And as the years have gone by, since 1980 or so, inequality has gotten greater and greater. So what types of strategies can you mention in order to make governmental changes within the structure of our countries that seem to be dominated by the power structures and corporations and greed? So what solutions do you have for actually changing things systemically?
Well, enlightened self-interest is going to help at some point, because what we know is that those countries which have lowest levels of inequality have the highest standards of happiness, of well-being, lowest levels of crime, best levels of education. And corporations many of them are bringing compassion into their ideology, because they can't recruit, they can't retain. And if you want to have a workforce that isn't turning over, especially post-pandemic, then you need to provide some sense of purpose, something that especially the younger members of our workforce can feel some pride and sense of identity in being part of. And there are many other things. I mean, we would like to see a compassion threshold introduced, which means that before you can pass any law or policy, you have to do an audit. What is the impact of this going to be on those in the most vulnerable circumstances? Really simple, really, really simple, just good housekeeping. What's going to happen to those who are homeless if we introduce this policy? If it's going to make the situation worse, we have to find another way of doing it. It's very simple. We're not constraining your ideology or your policy outcomes, but we are just saying find a way of doing it that doesn't create more harm. So a no harm principle, if you like. And then it's down to all of us to find our voices. You know, we do a lot of polling, and our polling shows that the vast majority of the public want more compassionate policies. You know, there was 73% support for that law that we introduced when we had that's being debated in the House of Commons, very low MP take up, but very high public take up. So we need to educate politicians about what the public really want, and we need to motivate the public to really hold firm when they make those demands.
Yeah, over there.
Hi. And maybe the answer to this is in the newsletter, which I'm definitely gonna sign up for, and maybe in the book. I have a similar question, which is when negotiating, I guess, one-on-one, are there best practices or strategies once you bring two different thinkers to the table to have a conversation that actually creates results?
Really interesting concept, but really interesting question. So we work with a lot of psychologists, and a lot of the practices that are used in the therapist's room are really, really useful. So for example, using I statements, creating a sense of safety in the other person, really trying to park anything you're bringing into the space, having curiosity rather than condemnation, seeking to understand, and also just this process of rowing over to the other person's island. What does it look like from where they're sitting? I know what it looks like from where I'm sitting, but I have no idea if I take the journey they've taken, what it's like, and how can I really stand in their shoes, and then I will better understand how to close the gap between us. And so much of it is about genuine connection rather than trying to, again, to be right, to get one's will over the other person. Well,
Jen, in a capitalist system, one of the ways compassion expresses itself is philanthropy. And we have an incredibly philanthropic society. But a lot of people say that if we had an economic system that worked for everybody, we wouldn't need to depend on philanthropy. So I guess my question is, how does compassion exist in a capitalist society where self-interest is everything?
Well, I don't think that it's a great question. I don't think that that's how capitalism needs to be. We in the UK, we have more of a mixed system where we have state provision, but we still have capitalism, and taxation for me is a more effective way of redistributing wealth than philanthropy. Philanthropy is wonderful, but again, it can be maverick. It's dependent on the flavor. 1 minute one causes the issue, and then suddenly everyone's running over to the other side of the room, and another issue takes precedence. So I personally think that taxation is more efficient, fairer, and a better way of making sure that everyone is provided for. In the UK, in Victorian times, we relied on philanthropy because the state wasn't doing its job and people were dying of hunger and in workhouses. And for me, it was progress that we developed a taxation system that could provide the very basics for everyone, so that no one needed to be free of want. Everyone could have their basic needs met. And then it's a choice. How much do you want? Go out, work, make your life what it is. But unless those basic needs of everyone are taken care of, then we're all the poorer as a result.
Any questions from our viewers?
Jennifer, thank you very much for the talk. It's excellent. And I'm wondering, I came across a book a year ago called Donut Economics.
Yeah, Kate Pickett, she's one of our supporters. Yeah, she's fantastic.
So I think it's the first book I've seen where old-fashioned economics is always about more and more profit. And donut economics is how do we solve our problems? That basically the hole in the donut is where we don't have enough of, and outside the donut is where we have too much of. And so we bring it back to the donut, and it's a major rethinking.
It's fantastic. And the other thing is that it starts from the premise that these are the resources we have. We have one planet. How do we make economics work within the reality of that one planet? At the moment we're living as if we had 3 planets worth of resources. And as inflation rises, certainly in the UK, everyone's hanging on to growth. Growth is our way out of this situation, out of the pandemic, post-pandemic slump. Growth is the answer, but we know we can't have infinite growth and tackle climate change. It's just not possible. So what, I really recommend that book, Donut Economics. What it says is, our starting point is, what have we actually got? You would think that would be a basic for economists. What have we actually got in the budget? But the budget doesn't look at the finite resources of the planet or the humans and animals. Sometimes.
This one back there.
Alex.
Really good talk, Jennifer. I think I agree with every word you say. But it also makes me sort of think of the flip side of compassion, in the systems we live in and operate in. So we're in a market economy. We have a party political system. And even in the natural world, competition between species. Without our intervention, it seems to self-regulate. So, I don't think you're proposing a world outside of that quite. So how do you, and maybe this is quite an abstract question, but how do you engineer the relationship between competition and collectivism and compassion? Are these oil and water, or actually do they productively mix? I mean, I suppose sort of on the radical left, they would say they can't, and therefore liberalism in the British sense doesn't work. You need a system that's completely about the
No, I think we've got a system that can work, but we just need to repurpose it. Imagine what it would be like if we said to economists, okay, your job is to improve national well-being, not gross national product. Take your brilliant theories, plans, graphs and charts, incentive schemes, but repurpose it to tackling climate change, to producing a well-being economy. It isn't, and there is legislative changes. I think you're further ahead here in the US, but in the UK, there's a movement now to change the fiduciary duty that board members are under, so that it's not just about producing the best financial returns. It can be about how can I produce the greatest well-being from the community within which we operate, and the Royal Academy, do I mean the Royal Academy? The British Academy, not the Royal Academy, the British Academy has done a fantastic report on the future of the corporation, where it points out that it's only since 1961 that corporations existed solely to increase their profits. So it's a relatively short period of time. Before that, if you think of the Cadburys, if you think of those big philanthropic families that knew that they needed a healthy workforce, many of them were Quakers, to have that their workers needed to be happy, well-fed, housed, educated in order for the company itself to flourish. So in fact, we've just taken a wrong turn. It isn't that we need to throw the whole system out. It's just that we need to take a few steps back from the precipice that we're all hurtling over now, and just say, what do we want to use these amazing systems and tools that we have to achieve? It's all about choice.
Do we have time for?
Spread it to serious.
Okay. You want to take one more question?
Sure.
Well, excuse me for.
There's one at the back as well.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I take one from somebody else's.
Yeah.
I was just gonna ask, how does gender play into this? I would guess that men are less compassionate than women are, and most companies, governments, countries are run by men. And so have you noticed the differentiation between genders in your studies?
Yeah, unfortunately, that is the case. But, I don't think that the male approach works particularly well for men either. It doesn't work for any of us. And, you just have to look at New Zealand's Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, to look at what a compassionate model of leadership looks like. And it's very, very attractive. We've had one female Nobel Prize winning economist. And I remember what Larry Summers said about women and why there weren't more successful women economists. And he then obviously went on to work with Obama. So yes, that it is a gendered issue, but not because men are at fault, because of cultural norms, education, what is and isn't permissible. But yes, if caring were given the same value in terms of leadership as getting first over the finishing line, we would have a very different environment. You know, if we were able to monetize, you know, the caring economy, all of that work that's invisible and has no wage attached to it, no financial value attached to it, if that was included, then things would start to shift. So it is partly a problem with gender, but without men being to blame.
All right, well,
Wonderful.
this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a good one, but you don't really have to buy it because it's an academic book.
But